Good evening, everybody. This is Charting Your Course, normally operated by Andrew Bartzies, Kathy Ma, and Debbie Smart. They're all involved in events in Oregon, Seattle, Washington, rather, not Oregon. My goodness. I normally produce this show. My name is Laura Lee Solomon, and I'm the host of Paths of the Great Adventure, which is a show about tarot, Kabbalah, and the rest of the Western occult tradition. It's currently involved in a series on the cube of space, alchemy, and astrology, about which I have to say that I've been pondering the astrology part because if you're going to talk about astrology to anyone, you have to make sure that they understand the terms of the discussion. And that involves somebody sitting down and learning certain symbols and what they mean and what their relationships are and understanding how the system of astrology works. So I was relatively certain that I didn't want to do it on air. And I started thinking, Lord of the universe, if astrology is really part of this, we're going to have to find some other venue in which to conduct the astrological portion of what we want to do here. And I let go of it, figuring that in God's good time, something would turn up. And it did. I posted an announcement to one of my regular shows on something called the Ageless Wisdom Forum on Facebook. And this is a group of folks who are involved with the Builders of the Atom, the order where I got my occult education and am still receiving it. And somebody piped up and pointed out to me that one of my sources, they pointed out which one in no uncertain terms, was largely plagiarist. And likewise me for not having a direct attribution about the picture I posted. Very picky individual, because I had talked about the illustration and its sources at length in the recorded show. And lo and behold, this argument went around and around for a bit, and we had a couple of dragon ladies arguing, and somebody remarked on that. And I decided, well, heck, I just need to deal with this somehow. And my inner guidance was, friend her on Facebook. So I did. And it's been interesting, because this is the astrologer who is now offering a 6 weeks course, free, except for doing a little posting on Facebook about your participation in that class on beginning astrology. A banner for that course is located on my timeline in Facebook. It's located on the station's Facebook page. That's Revolution Radio on Freedom's Lips. And probably a couple of other places as well. I know I first picked it up in my news feed, but there it is. There is an astrology course available to people who are interested in astrology. And if you're going to get as interested in alchemy as I have, then by gosh, astrology is one of the things you need to understand the basics of. Since Claire France Perez is in fact an astrologer, she is putting together her course with all the course participants' charts in place as Google documents, everyone identified by number. And you learn what your number is, and you're going to be working with your own chart to begin to understand how to interpret it. So there you go. Claire France Perez's beginning astrology class. One of the things that we who are involved in Builders of the Atom always do in starting any session of ours is we refer to our group's illustration of the Kabbalistic tree of life and a series of affirmative statements called either the master pattern or the pattern on the Trestleboard. The European groups generally refer to it as the master pattern a little more normally. But if you want to use this is available to you at www.bota.org. And I mention that because I'm going to use it at this point. It's accompanied by a full-color illustration of the Tree of Life, and each of the statements is numbered 0 through 10. The 0 statement encompasses the whole of the Tree of Life, and I kind of like to see it as setting up a boundary of protection around the individual or the group who is doing this series of affirmations. And because it includes a rather dynamic imaginal exercise, a ritual, I strongly recommend that boundary be considered a crystalline sphere. It's perfectly wonderful. It emits light and air and nothing else. The spheres on the tree depict the pattern by which the universe comes into being and is manifested. That is, held in being. And this pattern is the glyph of the lightning flash, it's called in Kabbalah. And it's that same lightning flash we were looking at in the stage of awakening when we talked last Sunday. And as we go through the tree and imagine ourselves as standing in the midst of it, not facing it, but backed into it. So you get the interesting exercise of reversing the image you can look at and the visualization you are doing, the way you're imagining it unfold in your mind's eye. And this little bit of imaginal gymnastics is very good for you, really, because it allows you to distinguish between what you perceive and what you see as a reflection. What's out there is a reflection of what's within. The work of going through the statements and the pattern of the lightning flash allows a lot of spiritual energy to be drawn into your being. And we use this as a form of development because without doing that concentration on any chakras or centers in the body, which produces imbalances and congestions and problems of all kinds, what we do is we bring in the undifferentiated life force. And bringing that in and down through our being causes what's already there to be pushed up through the centers we've got. And that does two things. It raises our personal energy from chakra to chakra, and it also, by moving that energy, helps remove or make us aware of any blockages in the field. And finally, those blockages, those obstructions, those distortions in our personal awareness become something we can become conscious of and work with. So the pattern on the Trestleboard is a daily, actually twice daily, morning and night recommended activity if you're a lesson student of Builders of the Atom. And this is the way it goes. This is the truth about the self. All the power that ever was or will be is here, now. I am a center of expression for the primal will to good, which eternally creates and sustains the universe. Through me, its unfailing wisdom takes form in thought and word. Filled with understanding of its perfect law, I am guided, moment by moment, along the path of liberation. From the exhaustless riches of its limitless substance, I draw all things needful, both spiritual and material. I recognize the manifestation of the undeviating justice in all the circumstances of my life. And in all things, great and small, I see the beauty of the divine expression. Living from that will, supported by its unfailing wisdom and understanding, mine is the victorious life. I look forward with confidence to the perfect realization of the eternal splendor of the limitless light. In thought and word and deed, I rest my life from day to day upon the sure foundation of eternal being. The kingdom of spirit is embodied in my flesh. And with that, the exercise comes to its conclusion. The pattern on the Trestleboard is recommended particularly if you need to draw energy in for some particular purpose. But it is recognized that if you're just doing this and then going on and manifesting your normal everyday patterns of experience and behavior, then that can cause you problems because you're energizing things that might not be in your best interest. And they will get a little more radical in your experience because of that and come to the point where you may need to do something constructive about them. So bear it in mind and use as you are guided from within. And we'll get on with what we were talking about, which was the 7 stages of spiritual unfoldment. We had gotten to the point where we were looking at the 4th column of the tarot tableau, which is a layout of the major trumps of tarot as a book of ageless wisdom. And that book of wisdom, the Etudes of Thoth, not necessarily the Thoth tarot deck, but the BOTA one, depicts in the symbolic language certain truths that are necessary for a genuine aspirant to the spiritual tradition and to initiation to understand. And we were looking at the emperor as the head of that column, seated on his throne in Aries, which is to say the part of the body ruled by Aries, which is the brain. The human body is the temple of the life power, and the brain is taken as the throne of that mode of universal consciousness, which constitutes creation in the darkness of the world. The world is the microcosm, man, and its darkness is the inertia of the physical organism. This constituting intelligence enthroned in the brain is one with the power which makes everything in the universe what it is. That power works always to establish in the realm of name and form an image of the perfect balance and symmetry of the inner life. So in the 4th stage of unfoldment, the work of the constituting intelligence begins to be perceived by the seeker for light. It is apprehended as a vivid personal experience, and one begins to know at first hand that the intelligence which formulates the constitution of the universe is not far off, but is immanent, which means present in human life, in your life, and is expressing itself through your living being. I think the most contemporary book that brings that kind of awareness to light in terms of science, and science is very much a part of the workings of reason, which is the function of the constituting intelligence, was Lynn McTaggart's book, The Field, because she talks about the formation of a certain philosophical concept of reality from its very outmost kind of look at it to something that becomes more and more inward as she goes through the book. And she's talking in terms of scientific research that we haven't heard much about unless we're very much involved in the inner traditions. It starts out with the idea of the resonant universe, and that the universe is in fact consisting chiefly as a sea of light in which matter is nothing more than a concentration of energy and not anything else but a concentration of energy. In fact, the science has revealed, as she sets it forth in her book, that matter as such only exists with this quality of inertia, because as you try to move it around, you're pushing it against its interactions with the field in which it is embedded. And there is some resistance to that motion, which is that inertia for which matter is famous. Likewise, this is the source of gravitation and the sense that matter is some hard, solid thing that we need to push against. But it is just energy. And basically the alchemical science that showed that is elucidated in this book, and also the biophysics that we are beings of light. And on a more precise level, the language of the cell. And listen, as we get down into the language of the cell, we really are talking about where the constituting intelligence takes its stand in forming our organisms. Because if we look at the column that we're discussing in the tableau, the manifestation of this function is very much shown in key 18 of tarot, entitled the Moon. The three cards in this column are the Emperor, Justice, and the Moon. The Emperor is the constituting intelligence. Justice goes with the letter Lamed, which means work. And the idea behind the letter Lamed is the ox goad. And the figure in key 11 has a sword in her hand with which she kind of pricks our butts to move us along, among other things. But this is very much about our exercise of mental balance, that dynamic balance that was discussed, and the ability to eliminate things that we don't want in our experience because these things impede our developing awareness. So we can use that sword of discrimination to cut them off. Then the result, as expressed in the Moon, is about the manifestation of subconscious awareness in our bodies. And this is our cellular organization. And it looks at the path of evolution, a rising and falling, undulating path going out from regions that are known through gates into the unknown. And the path arises in the water. And from the water, on the borders of the water, there are stones and there are plants, and there is a crustacean climbing up out of the pond. And then there are two wolves. And what we're looking at is the maxim of the Kabbalistic tradition: first the stone, then the plant, then the animal, and then man. That's the evolutionary order of development, and it's the similar kind of development that is talked about in terms of spiritual evolution. But the source of all of that development is this pool, which is the pool of matter, what we see in Yesod, which is the Akasha, the mixing bowl of the elements, the place where that energetic field in its flux and reflux pools as it becomes manifest in physical forms, which is its result. It's the same pool in key 17, the star, which we fish in the process of meditation. So in thinking the thoughts we think and holding the philosophy that we do, in identifying as a constituting intelligence in our own awareness, we are exerting sort of a biblical function that was set forth, I believe, in the book of Proverbs, the statement, "As a man thinketh, so is he." As you think and as you speak and as you reason, you are impacting the subconscious material of your physical organism and causing it to, in its exquisite responsiveness, change and develop in exactly the way that you are guiding it. But what's been realized in the terms of cellular structure and biophysics is that brain processes occur at the quantum level. The quantum level, remember, is that field, that same pool that we were looking at in tarot. Yes, the energetic field. Brain processes occur at the quantum level, and that the dendritic networks in the brain are operating in tandem through quantum coherence. The equations developed in quantum physics precisely describe this cooperative interaction. Independently, scientists Hammerhoff, Yasue, and his colleague Mary Jibu of the Department of Anesthesiology at Okayama University in Japan had also theorized that the quantum messaging of the brain must take place through vibrational fields along the microtubules of the cells. Others had theorized that the basis of all the brain's functions had to do with interaction between brain physiology and the zero-point field. An Italian physicist, Ezio Isina of the Bioelectronics Research Association, in his own experimental work with microtubules, discovered that these structures had a signaling mechanism thought to be associated with the transfer of electrons. Each of these scientists contributed their own piece to the puzzle, and they came together to assemble a collective theory about the nature of human consciousness. According to their theory, microtubules and the membranes of dendrites represented the internet of the body. Every neuron of the brain could log on at the same time and speak to every other neuron simultaneously via the quantum processes within. Not only the neurons, but all of the cells. As Bruce Lipton in his Biology of Belief pointed out, a cell can survive very well without its nucleus, but its membrane is where the action is. And the microtubules we're talking about go from the center of the cell to its membrane and allow intracellular communication via biophotons, actually. The microtubules help to marshal discordant energy and create global coherence in the waves of the body, a process called superradiance, which then allowed these coherent signals to pulse through the rest of the body. Once coherence was achieved, the photons could all travel along the light pipes, the microtubules, as if those were transparent, a phenomenon called self-induced transparency. Remember that tarot key entitled The Intelligence of Transparency in the Sephira Yetzirah. That's key 1, the magician, associated strongly with self-conscious awareness. The photons can penetrate the core of the microtubule and communicate with other photons throughout the body, causing collective cooperation of subatomic particles within the microtubules throughout the brain. And since this is the case, it accounts for that unity of thought and consciousness, the fact that we don't think of loads of disparate things at once, but everything is kind of a gestalt. Through this mechanism, coherence becomes contagious, moving from individual cells to cell assemblies, and in the brain from certain neuron cell assemblies to others. This provides an explanation for the instantaneous operation of our brains and awareness, which occurs at between 1/10,000th and 1/1000th of a second, requiring that information be transmitted at 100 to 1,000 meters per second, a speed that exceeds the capabilities of any known connections between axons or dendrites in neurons. Superradiance along the microtubules also accounts for the phenomenon that has long been observed, the tendency of EEG patterns in the brain to get synchronized. It was also noted in the book The Field that microtubules are hollow and empty save for some water. Ordinary water from a tap or in a river is disordered and the molecules move randomly. But some of the water molecules in the brain cells, in fact, in every cell, are coherent. The Italian team discovered this, and the coherence extends as far as 3 nanometers or more outside the cell's cytoskeleton. Since this is the case, it is overwhelmingly likely that the water inside the microtubules is also disordered water. The offered idea that this structured water consists of indirect evidence that some sort of quantum process creating quantum coherence occurs inside. They'd also shown that the focusing of waves could produce beams 15 nanometers in diameter, which is precisely the size of the microtubule's inner core. All of this is heretical thought in the scientific community, and it isn't generally supported by our mainstream science education and science discussion, but it was discovered as long ago as the 1950s in the work of Fritz Albert Popp. Consciousness is a global phenomenon that occurs everywhere in the body, not simply in the brain, and its basis is coherent light. We'll be back. We are back, and I'd like to point out to you that Revolution Radio, one of the largest listener-supported stations anywhere on the internet, is at its heart listener-supported. And right now, our fearless leader, the Nighthawk, is currently focused on getting himself and a team up to the Sioux Reservation in the Dakotas, where the standoff over the pipeline is happening. We sure need your participation in this project, and we hope you will seriously consider stopping by the station's Facebook page and clicking on that tab, which is all about supporting us, and hitting the donate button, and in your PayPal note, letting Hawk know that this is for Revolution Radio's live team up in the Dakotas at the standoff. We very much want to take part, and with that in mind, we very much want to ask you to donate. I am also interested in promoting, of course, Claire France Perez's astrology class, which is one of those miracles of manifestation. And interestingly enough, one of the consulting things she does is called the manifestation mandala, I believe it is. So with that in mind, do stop over at the station Facebook page or mine and find that astrology class and sign up for it. It is free except for a couple of 2 or 3 posts every week, as long as you are participating in the class, about the stuff you're encountering and linking back to it, which is a pretty good deal, actually. So back to our situation here, looking at the 7 stages of spiritual unfoldment. And I want to get finished up here looking at this 4th stage, in which we are spending some time looking at the Emperor key. The Emperor is seated on a throne, and that throne is a cube. And that cube is an interesting glyph that is considered one of the most important in all of the Kabbalistic tradition. It is first defined in the Sefer Yetzirah, which talks about the creation of the universe, as a special act of creation where the God named in the Hebrew as Jah, which is Yod and Hey, name associated with the second sphere on the tree of life. Wisdom actually creates a space first in which to manifest creation. And we are made in the image and likeness of our Creator. We all create that space for our personal creation of reality. And that is the cube on which you see the Emperor seated. That cube is known as the cube of space, and in his book, The Tarot, A Key to the Wisdom of the Ages, Paul Foster Case introduces the cube of space in his discussion of the fourth key, the Emperor. And he doesn't say much about it except to indicate that the edges of the cube are all assigned to the signs of the zodiac and what those are, and that the faces of the cube arise from the projection of the planetary energies, the classical planets of astrology, the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Mars. But at the very center of the cube resides the structuring force, the projector, the seat of our consciousness. And I want to point out that key 11, equated with the sign of Libra, has as the planet that is exalted in that sign, this same Saturn at the center of your personal cube of space. Lamed, as a verb in Hebrew, means to teach or to instruct, and as a noun, it is identical with the Hebrew letter name signifying an ox goad. So we're going to be taught, instructed, directed, and encouraged to move forward from that center which is at the cube of space. We are, each one of us, in the midst of a sophisticated tactile and audio-visual system of instruction called our life. And the events of our life arise and unfold because of the contents of our thought, as we have incorporated them into our subconscious awareness. So there it is, we have our body that is built by our consciousness, living our life in this cognitive box, the space of our creation. And we are technically in need of developing our mastery of the forces of that box. And that is what the whole science of alchemy is about. It is working with that vessel, that sealed vessel of creation, hermetically sealed, yes, just as the alchemists would have it. And that box is the theater of the absurd in which we unfold that mastery of self and circumstance, which comes from an ever closer alignment with universal intention, the one will, the divine presence within us. So this is the stage where we get our grips on the science of life, the realities of our control, and we start to learn to manipulate the controls, first at the level of our own bodies, and then in terms of wider, ever expanding fields of manifestation as our skill improves and our being becomes refined. But there are some specific points that are made about the whole business as mediated by the letter Lamed. Remember that this key is associated with the idea of action or work. And we act on the behalf of the one as individuals striving to become conscious centers of expression of the primal will to good. And because it's Libra we're looking at maintaining a balance, a dynamic balance, because as we can see the path unfolding in key 18, the moon, there are going to be ups and downs. There are challenges to our control and our ability to exercise our rational self-awareness in terms of what we do and what we think about things. It's always been said that it's how we respond to circumstances that's more important than the circumstances themselves. And this is very much the case. And it becomes critical in this stage of spiritual unfoldment. We are developing our control of self and circumstance in this particular phase of spiritual development. And our success in this phase gives rise to the next one. The next state of awareness, the fifth one, is born in our realization that the universe is dealing with us, that God immanent has things to express to us, and that this natural process is like a process of elimination. Remember, Libra rules the kidneys in astrology, and these are organs of elimination. It's like gradual raising of the level of cell consciousness, and this change brings about what may be likened to a clear stream of water being poured into a tank that's been clouded by impurities and is full of muddy water. And if there's an outlet for the dirty water, a time will come when all the water in the tank is clean. It is not going to be an instantaneous process. It unfolds in time. The natural processes of elimination are like an outlet for the dirty water, the water that's patterned in ways we don't want, from our own embodied selves. And as it is written in the Bible, new wine cannot be put into old bottles, old wineskins. The cells which have embodied the old error consciousness cannot contain the new truth concepts that we are building. And the greater the energy that comes in with every new influx, some of the cells are going to die off. They're actually killed by this change in thought. And some die because they're no longer used. Others because they just can't take the heat. And they pass into the bloodstream and are cast off through the various channels of elimination. Hence, the insistence on the eliminative functions of the body being kept at the greatest point of efficiency. Drinking adequate water, eating so as to facilitate not only the absorption of energy and nutrients, but to facilitate the elimination of wastes as well. And for all these various forms of purgation, the whole science of Ayurveda is about that. It's actually the Hindu version of alchemy. So if you're looking at Ayurveda, you are looking at the alchemical processes that we're talking about as they impact on the body. The sword of justice, the 11th key in tarot, symbolizes at once the cutting off of mind images of error and the destruction of cells embodying these mind images. These useless cells are not eliminated all at once. Hence, justice also carries her scales. The content that you're trying to get rid of must not run out faster than the pure influx, or else the tank will be emptied. Similarly, the unwise use of denial as the counterpuntal to affirmation, denials, may so deplete our bodies that the diseases of elimination, particularly of the kidneys, may be induced. There are physical problems you can cause if you get too radical about applying dietary restrictions too. So to pull out the tares from the field before the wheat is ripe, so to speak, is to risk destroying the crop along with the weeds. Proceed slowly. Avoid this danger by surrendering the whole work to the one self whose work it is, the great work. This is the stage at which alchemy is engaged. And you really understand the real presence of the constituting intelligence in its work here, to rid yourself of the impatience that has to have illumination happen for you all at once. It unfolds gradually. The life power knows just what to do. We need only recognize its operation in our lives and let the work be done gradually and gently, surely and perfectly, as we engage our practices day to day. The fourth stage of unfoldment, then, is that in which the seeker for light begins to learn the secret of right action. He finds that personality is the instrument of a power which not only knows just what it is doing with that instrument, but also knows just what must be done in order to keep the instrument in good repair. The more receptive we become to its information, the better we understand that the secret of right action is in giving up all personal attachment to results. Attachment is the desire to see a particular manifestation of name and form. It is a phase of the delusion of separateness. Do whatever comes to hand with no thought but that the doing shall be your very best. That is the secret of right action. Does this mean that we are to entertain no visions of the future? Not at all. The warning is against attachment to results. You have to drop your vision and let it go and let it become a seed in the subconscious, the soil in the subconscious, to sprout and grow. And remember that the subconsciousness, the vastness of the Jungian unconscious, is transpersonal. It is not limited to the personal sphere of awareness. We, by the practice of contemplation, open the personal mind to the influx of higher consciousness. So we become sharers in the vision of future seen by the true self. So instead of making strictly personal plans, we become aware of certain specific details of a cosmic plan. Instead of trying to do the thing our way, we start building not from our partial knowledge, but from the plans of the master builder, and erect our house of life on the sure foundation of eternal being. Because the one self builds for eternity, not for the transitory sensory pleasures of any one lifetime. In short, the fourth stage of unfoldment is the one in which the plan-making power of the vast life power itself begins to find personal expression. Specific images enter the field of our mental vision. Patterns are given us for our work. And the better we know that we are instruments for the constituting intelligence, the more precise and accurate those patterns will be. So in this body or through it, the life power finds expression as interior vision, and it shows us step by step what lies ahead of us on the journey along the path that leads upward from the plane of third-dimensional consciousness to the heights beyond, which opens us on the next stage, which is summed up in the term regeneration. The results of the processes of regeneration may be seen in the bottom key of the fifth column. This is number 19, the sun. And in it, we're shown two children dancing within the boundaries of nested circles. And those nested circles are very much about the difference between the personal, that is the sure foundation, the personal self, what you know you can do in and of yourself, and what is possible to the one self working through you, which is the vaster circle. So in looking at key 19, we see the product of the regeneration that is the goal of the life power. Key 19, the Sun of Tarot. And it's really about, as the letter Resh assigned to it would indicate, the head and face of man, which are the place where is gathered together or collected all the distinctive human powers. The word countenance, as derived from the Latin word meaning to hold together, to contain, is very much about our personal field of manifestation. And the sun is the heavenly body that is very much associated with this key. It is exalted in Aries, which is key 4, where the emperor resides, and rules Leo, key 8, strength, which we saw in the first column. It is the power which reaches its highest manifestation in reason, and which always and everywhere is the ruling force which makes effective the laws symbolized by strength. And strength, remember, shows the subconscious rule of all the kingdoms of nature below that of the self-conscious awareness. This is the collective intelligence, and this is the mode of consciousness we're talking about. We're bringing together, unifying, embodying, synthesizing all the modes of consciousness that have gone before, and in a new form. The regenerative mode of consciousness is about a new realization of personality. There is a wall outside of which the children are dancing, and that wall defines the limits of normal human functioning and all the kingdoms of nature below it. In that garden, behind the wall, there are 4 sunflowers representing numbers of things: the 4 Kabbalistic worlds, the 4 kingdoms of nature, mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. And they turn not towards the day star, but towards the little children, as if in a hint that all creation turns to man for its final development. Man is not an animal. You are not something whose memory can be uploaded into a computer and thereby render you immortal. No, you are the crown and the perfecting agency of all creation. The hands of God, as it were, on the control. And the regenerate human is someone who is so attuned to the functional reality of the collective. The collective is no longer just unconscious. It is conscious with you. This puts you in what BOTA actually refers to as a 5th kingdom of nature, a spiritualized humanity. These are the children of God. It is composed of human beings who, by understanding the law of evolution, which has brought organized life expression as far as ordinary genus Homo, is enabled to apply that law to the process of self-evolution and generate the new creature. The new creature, as discussed in biblical terms, was, unless ye become as little children, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. And these are the little children referred to. One of the manifestations of this collective awareness is a complete and absolute reliance on the intelligence of the one life in the field that supports and maintains all creation. And that intelligence in the field is enhanced by our personal operation in awareness of it and in attunement with it, so that its goals become our goals. And we become, as little children, no longer worried about anything. We don't have to make things happen. We are literally playing in the garden. And that is the hallmark of this particular phase of development, which always looks within for its guidance. It finds its instruction there, and it arises to awareness via the good offices of the subconscious mind. An inner knowing. We tap the field for our instruction. The process is no longer being done to us. We are part of the process. We'll be back. We're back, and with it, we are looking at the stage of regeneration, the fifth stage of spiritual unfoldment. And we're looking particularly at key 19, the results of that stage. And we were looking at the garden and the sunflowers, which looked to the children as though they were the sun. This echoes what was shown in key 8 with the woman leading the lion and leading it by a chain of roses, which are essentially the symbols of desires, so that the subconscious self, the woman, does in fact command all the forces of nature below that of man. That particular garden with the sunflowers growing in it means a lot of things, but it's very much about our role in nature. And as we become more attuned to the one self, it's as though the whole line of sages, prophets, adept, and masters who belong to the fifth kingdom are kind of like a yeast in the presence of humanity, and some of us are impacted by them and some of us are less sensitive. Ultimately, everyone develops the higher awareness that makes for this stage of regeneration. And these are symbolized by the sunflower, which is in bud, rather in full bloom in that garden. All members of the fifth kingdom have as their outstanding characteristic their utter dependence on the universal life power. And this fifth sunflower is the one that is turned towards the sun. The sun is one which has a human countenance, and it's the dominant symbol in the key, and it represents the truth that the seemingly material forces of nature are really modes of conscious energy which are essentially human in character and potencies. So that all of nature is essentially human in character and potency, and this includes all the kingdoms of nature below that of human self-conscious awareness. There's a wall that is present, another major feature, and this represents the human adaptation of natural conditions. It is a symbol of the whole chain of ideas related to the letter Chet in the Hebrew, which means offense, which demarks the field of cultivation, just as the cube demarks that field of your personal awareness, which is under cultivation by the one self in and through you. So the wall is especially related to the ideas of speech as set forth in key 7, which is related to Cheth. It is assigned to that letter about the fence. And the function of speech, shown in the background of key 19, indicates that the underlying forces at work have to do with the creative word. It is built of stone instead of the bricks that compose the tower of key 16, the one that gets knocked over by the lightning. Wherever stone appears in tarot symbolism, we are to understand that it is a reference to the Hebrew word eben, which means stone, and also signifies the perfect union between the Father, divine wisdom, Ab, and Ben, the one self of the entire human race, which they call the Son. So the Father and the Son are at one, and when they are in unity indeed, we have what Paramahansa Yogananda always called a yogi Christ, indicating this as a state of spiritual attainment and Christ as a title, not a last name. From the most primitive speech to the most highly evolved languages, humanity's word forms evolve as a direct consequence of the fact that the word maker is the central self. The namer and the definer is Adam as symbolized in key 4. And as that self evolves higher and higher types of personality through successive rounds and races of evolution, language becomes a more and more adequate vehicle for the expression of ideas. Yet all human language has one basic limitation. Its words are descriptions of or labels for various types of sense experience. Thus the wall, though it is of stone, has but 5 courses symbolizing the 5 basic human senses. Even in the languages which have the largest vocabularies, all concrete terms are limited to describing things and activities within the range of the senses, and all abstract terms are derived directly from sensory experience, simile, and metaphor. This is why language fails when one attempts to use it to represent experiences which go beyond the realm of physical sensation. And this is why mystics and seers are forced to resort to the symbolic uses of language, and why the tarot was written in symbolic imagery rather than in words of language. Because like Chinese, the symbolic imagery can be interpreted across a vast array of languages. Nobody could be more eager to express himself than a person of wisdom who has first-hand knowledge of the inner and higher planes of experience. This is especially apparent in the writings of the alchemists who discovered a great secret and they wished to share it, yet none of them succeeded in saying what he saw. To most readers, the alchemists seem to be doing their best to conceal what they know. The truth of the matter is that ordinary speech will not serve to convey this kind of experience from one mind to another. The experience is something you must, in fact, go through yourself, and then you know. On the other hand, he who has experience finds that he has no difficulty in understanding the words that are strung together to try and imply the experience. And as one grows into this state of consciousness, which we have called the fifth kingdom, one understands the special meanings that the sages give to words. And one discovers that for the seers of all periods of human history, there is a new language intelligible to all who have had the higher kind of experience. Yet even this magical language will not serve to express the highest forms of realization. Consequently, the children in the key are shown standing with their backs to the wall, and the little girl indeed turns the palm of her hand towards the wall as if in a gesture of repudiation. The children are nude to show the state of their Edenic innocence comparable to that of the lovers in Key 6, which we'll be looking at next. They are not quite adolescent to indicate that this stage of unfoldment, though it is one of regeneration, is not the full unfoldment of the powers of the fifth kingdom of humanity. The children represent the self-conscious and subconscious awareness of the child of God. They are dancing in the fairy ring, their hands clasped, suggesting perfect union and rhythmic synchronization of the activities of the two modes of human personality. Each has one foot planted firmly in the central circle of the ring, and the other foot is free to swing. The boy's right hand is extended before him, palm upward, as if ready to accept something he expects to receive. This represents the fifth stage of spiritual unfoldment, and it is a degree of adeptship and liberation from the limitations of physical matter and circumstances. It is also a grade of self-conscious identification with the one life, but it is not final. And in this not finalness, we have two further stages of spiritual unfoldment to talk about. But before I go on to them, I want to focus briefly on Key 5 at the head of this particular column. Key 5 is the Hierophant. Its letter is the Hebrew letter Vav, which means a nail or hook, and it is the Hebrew equivalent for the conjunction and, as we use it in English. The life breath is not merely the beginning and the end of manifestation, it is the middle, too. It is the connecting medium between all modes of its self-manifestation. And this connecting office the Kabbalists associate with the sense of hearing. Note that the central figure wearing the crown of a pope has the ears peculiarly emphasized by the drape of a scarf, which is yellow and violet. It's also got to do with the subtle principle of sound vibration, which is the Akasha itself, as termed by the Hindu philosophers. Akasha is this root substance that carries the vibration of sound. And sound, as if you are versed in the Hindu tradition, you understand that it is said, through sound the world stands. And you start to become aware of the vibratory power of the word. When the life power begins to objectify itself, Akasha first, and then the other four tattvas themselves, differentiations of the Akasha, these come into existence. They are like waves on the ocean or beads on a string, and Akasha is the connecting link or string that joins the beads, the ocean combining all the waves. Vav then, as representing the Akasha, is fundamentally a symbol of the interior nature of the life power and the universal subjective consciousness. And it indicates that the office of subjective consciousness or subconsciousness is to act as a conjunction and intermediary, binding together all the seemingly separate manifestations of the life power. This is the collective consciousness of us all. And we will see its particular manifestation unfold in greater detail in the 6th stage of spiritual awareness. But that one teacher whose teaching arises within is the Hierophant. He is our own real self, and the ministers kneeling before him are the personal modes of self-conscious and subconscious awareness, the objective and the subjective consciousness. I remember once, years and years ago, taking part with a friend in actually an acid experience, and we were arguing the subjective and objective. She was holding out, as her scientific worldview would have it, for the objective nature of reality, and I was holding out for the subjective nature in reality, and in truth, it is both. The one teacher has both the objective and the subjective self-awareness as its students in that classroom, which is the cubical stone upon which the emperor was seated. And it is in the submission of these selves, becoming children of this one life, and inheritors, therefore, of all the potencies of divinity, that we are submitting ourselves to the guidance which comes not from above or externally, but from within, at the very center of your being. This is the law you must obey, not that of some alien sovereign. And this is the perfect method of the Eternal One expressing itself through you, moment by moment, day by day, the path of conscious liberation, giving rise to the 6th stage of spiritual unfoldment, realization. The tarot keys that go with the stage of realization are the Lovers, assigned to the Hebrew letter Zayin, Death, assigned to the Hebrew letter Nun, and Judgment, assigned to the Hebrew letter Shin. This is an extremely potent stage of spiritual unfoldment. This is the stage of being a master, an actual and genuine master. The children that we saw dancing in the fairy circle of key 19 are now adults. The male, the man, is backed by a tree bearing triple flames, 12 of them. They symbolize the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 3 decanates of each sign. His is the life experience. His has been the outward attention, but his attention is directed to the subconsciousness and within. And he looks to the woman who is backed by a tree bearing 5 fruits, the fruits of sensory awareness. But she is not looking to the fruits of the tree or the serpent that are behind her. She is looking to the archangelic presence above. That archangel is the Archangel Raphael, the archangel of air, as representative of the higher mind, the higher self, and an ever-increasing personal awareness of that one as self, a power that is intimately connected and part of our psychology, because key 6 is breaking down the parts of the psychology as self-conscious, subconscious, and superconsciousness. And we see their arrangement as triangular, a fire triangle pointed upward. Between the man and the woman is a mountain in the background, a mountain of spiritual attainment, the mountain which represents the developed potencies of the mountain of revelation, to which we resort actually in meditation. This is a high development of this state of meditation, but it is also a clear definition of the parts of self and a knowledge of what part of oneself is acting in any particular course that one is taking. This is the stage of unfoldment immediately preceding cosmic consciousness. The scene has some features of the material plane, as do all the keys in this column. And looking at the result key is astonishing because it is presided over also by an archangel. The figures of the man and woman in this key are gray, indicating the coming together and the unity of self and subconscious awareness, of force and form as depicted on the tree of life as the gray and the black spheres. And these have come together to produce a child. And this child is the divine child. He is the children again of key 19, but in unity, the unity of self and subconscious awareness. And if you look at these figures, you see that they're in key 20, are standing in gray cubical stone shapes. They are arisen from the structure of 3-dimensional self-conscious awareness and have awareness beyond that level. They are activated as such, called forth from the tomb of 3-dimensional consciousness by the vibrations put forth by the archangel in this key. The sound vibrations emitted by the trumpet in the hands of the archangel Gabriel. The last judgment is a time that comes to each of us when we step out of the bounds of 3-dimensional awareness, just as though we were participating in a near-death experience, except that consciousness is definitely an ongoing state of awareness, and we act from it. We are always in that transpersonal state of awareness, not just looking into it briefly, not just manifesting it in a limited way. It is who we are. And therefore, death, the key in the middle, death is something that has definitely been overcome, because death is the cessation of any one particular physical manifestation that we might experience. And instead, death is looked upon very differently because we've moved beyond it. We've moved beyond the limiting factor of death, and we take the harvest of lifetimes, the lifetimes represented by the living heads of a man and a woman, the crowned king and the female, or the self-conscious and subconscious awareness again, the hands that have done the work, the feet that have walked the path over lifetimes. And you know those lifetimes. They become part of your record, and you have transcended space and time, which is that three-dimensional awareness. The stage of realization is the realization of our awareness of our divinity. It is what is often called God realization. This is an individual who is able to say with the Christ, the Father and I are one. And this kind of consciousness is available to all of us and is indeed a heritage of our process of spiritual maturation. There are some details that are set forth in the book that I had pointed out to everyone at first. Paul Case's book, earliest book, as republished by the Society of the Inner Light, that I linked everyone to last week, that really don't need to go into this one, except for one detail that needs to be talked about. The practical occultist makes use of sound vibration. Even if he has never heard of the greater mysteries of sound, the very beginner who repeats an affirmation, such as the affirmations we started with, is using this power. And when he utters the words of affirmation aloud, or whether he is reciting them orally, he is expressing an idea in a sequence of tones that is always related to that idea. And this Eastern science in the Hindu tradition is mantra yoga. But the use of sound is something that is a very strong factor in triggering spiritual awareness. And it's not something I've heard Andrew talk about a lot. He doesn't get into the ideas of music very much. But I will point out that my experience of the tower struck by lightning was a result of working with music. And I wasn't doing it as a conscious spiritual exercise. I was doing it for my own amusement as I drove to work every day. And this was back in the early 90s. In fact, 1990, 1991, and I was listening to the music of Enya. And I was driving along, practicing that consciousness, which is the uniting intelligence, the united reality of all of us on the roads at that hour of the morning, headed for work, as a flow of force that was really one worker and one life. And I was blessing that one worker and that one life and all of us on the road together with the state of loving unity that music opened up in me. And I was doing this morning after morning until one day, while I was singing along with Enya, as I turned from the main highway, which was actually in Houston, that was I-10, and headed south towards my particular job. Remember, south is key 19 on the cube of space, the sun. Headed for the job, and I felt myself being observed. There was a clear-cut sense of presence. Someone was watching me, and they weren't visible, but they were as clearly watching me as though they stood at the intersection of the road south and the interstate, the point at which I had turned. And they were observing what I was doing and kind of taking note. And I found this deeply startling. It pulled me up short. I was being watched by a member of the inner school. A member of the inner school who was directly associated with me and my instruction. I won't say who at this time, but I noted it as a major turning event in my life. One that was followed up on the next day as I proceeded about my daily routine, headed to work the next day, still singing along with Enya, still blessing everyone in traffic with me as part of and parcel of my own being. And lo and behold, there was this presence again, and he wasn't alone. He had consulted with a higher level, and then higher level was also present and noting what I was up to. And that was the morning that I got my bliss hit from the sun, and the golden amber light poured through the top of my head and through my being, and accepted and loved every bit of who I was, just as described in a near-death experience, only I wasn't struck by lightning. I was struck by love. I wasn't like Danny and Brinkley and getting the actual lightning bolt every time the universe wanted his attention. But I had somebody's attention, and the door was opened. We'll be back. We are back, and we left off at a very decisive moment in my personal experience. I was a kid dancing on the playground on my way to work in the morning, and I wasn't focused on what I had to do at work, which was where I was employed as a technical writer, and I also did some mechanical design and drafting. I wasn't worrying about what was going on at work. I was enjoying driving my car and being in the sunlight of the music of Enya that opened me to a very connected, loving consciousness, very, very much attuned to the green color of the Empress, very fourth ray. Loving all of nature and my fellows on the road in the morning. And that kid dancing on the playground met some of the staff. The staff, I would say, of the inner school. And for that reason, I have added to your book list, listeners to Charting Your Course. And please bear in mind that the book list for my own show is rather more extensive, and we're only nibbling on the bottom of it here with the first book I threw at you, and now the second one. The second one is by a man who lived in 1752 to 1803, and his name was Karl von Eckartshausen. Eckartshausen was a Catholic mystic. He's a German, very much a Bavarian, in fact. And if you look at the time frame and the ethnicity, something should come to your mind. This man was there when Weishaupt founded the Illuminati. In fact, Karl von Eckartson joined the Illuminati for a time. His opinion of it, once he was exposed to its work, was that it was quite limited because their standard of highest order practice was reason. It went no further than that. Their illumination was the illumination of the age in which it was part, and the whole time period was associated with the French reason thing, as expressed by Voltaire and all of those wonderful people. So what we were looking at in those days was very much something to do with we can figure out our way out of this box, basically. They are still that kind of rational materialists, and as such do not represent the inner school. This is one of the reasons that Eckartson, actually, in his wisdom as a mystic, withdrew from the Illuminati and resigned his place with them, and wrote the book Cloud Upon the Sanctuary. And Cloud Upon the Sanctuary was very much a book about his awareness of the inner school and the members thereof. And it will certainly repay your reading. It's not something that you are going to be able to read in preparation for this, but it's certainly something that will lead you further on your journey, as it led him further on from the bastions of the Enlightenment to something beyond. And it is that something beyond which these last two stages of spiritual unfoldment are very much about. When we come under the instruction of the inner school, we are an aspirant, and that instruction is very much administered through vehicles of the dissemination of the knowledge, and the Builders of the Adytum is one of those. The Inner Light group that published Paul Case's book that I had linked earlier was very much one of those. There are all sorts of very genuine, earnest centers that are putting out this knowledge. But once you make that contact with the inner school, even though the experience is very much a what in the world just happened kind of experience, you never forget it. And it's very much like Saul of Tarsus never forgot his adventure on the road to Damascus. I always refer to mine as the vision on the road to Rose Electronics, which is where I was employed. And it was the most amazing thing. And it very much made me an aspirant on the path of return, which is why I am where I am today, doing what I am talking to you, in large part. Why, when I had a time slot on Revolution Radio and something to do with it, I actually had something I could say. And that was the teachings that I have received. And indeed, all I do is compile my notes from those sources that are shown to me during the week, some of them Paul Case's own writings, and under the direction of that same inner school, I represent them. I don't claim to be the author of any of it. I'm just expressing what was expressed by those who came before me. And the more selfless and unego involved I can be about it, the better. Because if you sign up for that class, that astrology class, one of the charts you will see is mine. And you will notice it has Leo rising and Pluto on the ascendant. If there is anybody who needs to work on detachment and not being not being not only not taking things personally, but not taking credit personally, then you're looking at that person and the life path that I am on. So I started with Revolution Radio as a producer behind the scenes. And I work in that aspect for Andrew Bartzies as well. Andrew is also an initiate on the path. And we're all working towards the 7th stage of spiritual unfoldment as expressed on the last row of the last column, rather, of the tarot tableau, the Chariot, Temperance, and the World. We're talking about the reality of cosmic consciousness. The world is assigned the letter Tav and is the equivalent of the planet Saturn. They're at the center of the cube of space. And a person at that stage of unfoldment has absolute self-conscious control of everything that happens around them. They are not only aware of its source, but they are aware of its source as as arising within themselves, because they're at a level that their outer circle of awareness is now so much vaster than one has when one is just a child of God. Those who stand on that pinnacle really do see farther. And even so, they are still bounded by the conditions of the physical universe, so that the insights that they have and the energies they handle, although they are cosmic in scope, are also capable of being very particular and very personal. The agency that they exert in the world is that of the Archangel Michael, as is shown in key 14, occupying the agency row of that key. And this is the conscious alchemical key. This is is alchemy as the one life does it, applying water to the fiery nature and fire to the watery nature to create a cosmic balance. And that balance takes form essentially as the one dancer in a sphere. This is someone who shares the consciousness of God. And I will say very frankly that with Saturn as the planet of cosmic consciousness and the one dancer, veiled by the appearances of the mechanistic nature of the universe, but a synchronized rhythmic motion as a living being, you're looking at the dance of the one dancer, which in the Hindu tradition is Shiva Nataraj, the Lord of the Dance. You see the Shiva Nataraj as the Lord of the Dance in front of CERN, and people get all concerned because Shiva is associated with destruction. But in the hands of the one dancer, there are two spirals. One spiral winds one way and the other spiral winds the other. Creation and destruction are balanced, exquisitely balanced, balanced down to the subatomic particle coming into manifestation out of the field, or disappearing from manifestation into the field. This is a picture of the life that is the field. The one conscious life, which is all that is. And it is not evil in its nature, although destruction is part of its nature. And we who are sense-based organisms cannot help but see that which is challenging or difficult as being painful, and associating it with evil because it's painful. Paramahansa Yogananda wrote a book early in his career called The Science of Religion, and it was very much about the human pain and pleasure axis, and how that axis defined good and evil in our awareness. and made us very much polarized in our understanding. But unity consciousness is different. Unity consciousness is very much about the existence of balanced dynamic forces, and you have to be aware of the forces of destruction just as acutely as the forces of creation. Not that we take them as evil, but that they have their place. And this is the place of the Son of Heaven. This is the place of a fully manifested ascended master who can be physical or not as he chooses, who is the radiant light, who comes and goes as a presence in that radiant light, and whose face that radiant light uses as its own face. And indeed, in the alchemy classes I've been presenting, one of the meditational glyphs, and you can see it where my show from Saturday morning is posted, the Azoth of the Alchemist has at its very center a human face. And that human face is depicted in a downward pointing triangle. And it's understood that this is a meditative process of the stages of alchemical thinking, where one goes through this 7-stage process as a meditation and uses it on a continuing basis, just like BOTA uses the pattern on the Trestleboard. And the face in the downward pointing triangle is understood as being the face of God superimposed over the alchemist's own face and being. And it is a downward pointing triangle because it is that divine grace, which is depicted in Christian iconography as the dove of spirit holding the wafer of communion over the chalice, which is the Holy Grail. So what is the Holy Grail? It is the receptacle of divine grace. It is you and me and every member of the conscious communion of divine life, which is that unity consciousness. It is the grace of God given unto us just as freely as the rain falls from the sky or the light pours from the sun. By the slow processes of evolution, the life power brings us to the point where, by thinking, we may discover the hidden forces which are manifested in the conditions of our environment. And to go beyond those conditions, we adapt and change and begin to take up where nature leaves off. But before we can see the glory of the Shekinah, the one life, the field, we must build a house for it, and hence we call our work an art. And the work is to build the Aditum, that place in the temple where the presence of God resides. Only the temple is the temple within. The chariot of the charioteer is the Aditum. Its presence standing within it, the charioteer, is God manifest in human life. More than this, it's not just a dwelling place of the Most High. It is a dwelling place of the Most High that is on wheels, and those wheels are the wheel of fortune, a cyclic rotational process of going forward. And the Sphinx is drawn, the chariot is drawn in the BOTA tarot by sphinxes, one light and one dark. The sphinxes are agencies that pose puzzles. And the puzzles are positive or negative in nature, but they are our sense-based experience. And the charioteer has in his hands reins that you cannot see. The reins are your personal mind once they become a transparent conduit for the one life entering physical manifestation. And the forces channeled by that particular manifestation of God are cosmic in nature, as symbolized by the canopy over the charioteer's head, bearing all the stars. The way leads within, and where you are, there also is that lodge of which you are a fellow, that church of which you are a member, of which von Eckarthausen writes. That name is really difficult, even though I am myself of German heritage in part. To follow the advice of the Chinese teacher of the Tao, having emptied yourself, remain where you are. Understand that to empty yourself is to be rid of the illusion of separate existence. And then, no matter where you are, you may enter into the company of the inner school and receive its instruction and pass from grade to grade and eventually become a teacher therein. Even as the radio gives us the faculty of listening to a distant voice, so we are equipped to hear and respond to that inner voice, our own inner knowing that is not a voice alone, but the complete presence of those great beings whose macrocosmic abodes may be far off in the stars, but whose instruction is come to us here and now as our instructors, those who are the staff of the inner school. People like those I encountered on the road to Rose Electronics, angelic beings, if you will. But we must be aware of the possibility in order to begin to guide our subjective mind in building the kind of vessel of life that is receptive to their influence. The highest expression of occult speech is found in those special exercises where thought, sound, and color are united in words of power. And we've referred to this earlier as mantra yoga, but the science has been developed in other than Hindu forms, and its purpose is the modification of every cell of the body. Indeed, in my ongoing studies of alchemy, I have learned that there are specialized forms of water that I mentioned earlier as being present in the microtubules of our cellular structure. That water is called structured water, or by one of the researchers into it, it's called EZ water. But it's a form of water that you can make and use. I have my alchemy study is focused on a practical exercise in using Dr. What is his name? I keep forgetting it. I'm going to have to look it up so I can enunciate it correctly. He wrote about the miraculous expression of water as it takes place in frozen water crystals. And he's very much Japanese, Masaru Emoto. Dr. Emoto's work in charging water by exposing it to certain influences, such as loving intentions, or even labeling it with words. And structuring the water is a matter of also not only putting specific kinds of meaning into it, but charging it in a particular way, perhaps by vorticular motion. That's one you can experiment with. But in one of the ways that the water in your cellular structure becomes organized is by exposure to light. And by exposure to light, it is a force that makes a lot more of this structured water within your organism, within the cells of your organism, than is present without that exposure to light. And in that particular point, I want you to focus briefly on key 14, because the archangel is crowned by a rainbow. Now, there is an ancient tradition which the Muslims characterize as devil worship, very much as they do the folks here in the West, that was practiced by a group of Kurdish ethnic origins called the Yazidi. And the Yazidi worship someone, an entity they call the peacock angel. The first manifestation of the peacock angel in their presentation of the creation function was as the 7 colors of the rainbow. In worshiping Melek Taus, the king of this world, they are in fact worshiping light, not as a god of evil, but as a god of manifest reality. And that is something for you to think about and study the possibility